Alice, Sweet Alice, did not emerge as a traditional 1,970 seconds thriller. It arrived like a quiet fracture in the decade's fragile suburban innocence. What should have been a modest production instead unraveled into a tangle of controversy, technical mishaps, and unwanted symbolism that clung to every scene. The violence felt disturbingly intimate, the religious setting too emotionally charged, and the performances hovered somewhere between realism and delirium. Early audiences argued not about the plot, but about whether the film itself had crossed an unseen moral line. Why did a small, troubled movie provoke such outsized fears, and why has its shadow lengthened with every passing decade? These are 20 weird facts you didn't know about. Alice, Sweet Alice. Fact 1. The mask at the center of Alice, Sweet Alice, began as an afterthought, a cheap placeholder meant to be replaced once funding stabilized, but nothing else. The production tested behaved quite like it. The translucent plastic reacted unpredictably to heat, softening just enough under tungsten lamps to warp into a carnivalesque grimace. Actors described feeling watched by it. Not because it displayed expression, but because it erased expression entirely, creating a sense of presence without identity. The cinematographer noticed the mask registered on film before the performer fully entered frame, as if the light recognized the object sooner than the human behind it. When examining dailies, the director recognized an accidental icon, a face that reflected dread rather than projecting it. Crew members avoided handling the mask unless necessary, claiming it seemed to tilt or shift when no one touched it. Even when stored away, it caught stray illumination in the dark, glowing faintly like a misplaced apparition waiting to be summoned. The mask wasn't crafted to terrify, it simply refused to behave like an ordinary object. Fact 2. The church that anchors the film's moral and psychological weight was not chosen for its symbolism, but because it was the only parish willing to tolerate the chaos of a low-budget horror shoot. The deteriorating building offered unpredictable acoustics, whispers stretched into warped confessions, footsteps cracked against marble like sudden accusations, and drafts crept through hallways as if the structure exhaled disapproval. Early shots revealed that stained glass windows changed color, mood, depending on the hour, turning scenes somber in the morning and sinister by late afternoon. Parishioners grew uneasy, accusing the crew of exploiting sacred space, especially after props depicting violence were found scattered near devotional candles. A visiting priest declared the atmosphere spiritually strained, an assessment that unsettled even the most skeptical crew members. Instead of retreating, the director adjusted blocking to let the church's shifting character swallow the actors, letting stillness speak louder than dialogue. The location wasn't meant to feel haunted or judgmental, it simply revealed itself that way. Fact 3. Brooke Shields' appearance in the film endures as one of its most misleading legacies, a distortion created not by intent but by the unpredictable arc of her later stardom. At the time of filming, she was a local child actor whose brief role served as a simple narrative catalyst. No one imagined her future fame would prompt distributors to resurrect the film twice, each time reshaping marketing to imply she carried the story. Posters magnified her image, taglines hinted at her prominence, and audiences arrived expecting a vehicle built around her innocence. The dissonance between expectation and reality produced a strange cultural echo. Many viewers remembered scenes she never filmed, convinced she appeared long after her character's demise. Scholars now compare this phenomenon to collective misremembering, a creeping psychological residue that altered the film's reputation as much as its content. The director bristled at the rebranding, believing the studio had hijacked the film's emotional architecture, but the shift was irreversible. Shields didn't just outgrow her cameo, her fame rewrote the movie's identity from the outside in. Fact 4. The knife that became a recurring emblem of dread wasn't selected for menace, but for practicality. It photographed cleanly under bright lights and appeared harmless during tests. Yet once filming began, the blade developed a peculiar visual personality. Depending on angle and exposure, it stretched into sharp, needle-like reflections that made it seem more threatening than its dull edge. Justified, actors swore the knife changed weight mid-scene, becoming inexplicably lighter or heavier, as though reacting to their anxiety. The prop master repeatedly found it in places no one admitted leaving it: a pew, a stair landing, the corner of a dressing room, as if the blade were drifting through the set with its own sense of staging. The director capitalized on this unpredictability. reframing scenes to highlight the knife's unsettling way of catching stray illumination. By the time the movie was finished, the crew no longer regarded it as an inert tool, but as a presence that inserted itself wherever fear required it. The knife didn't symbolize danger, it moved like it understood its role. Fact 5. The film's murky, dreamlike visual texture emerged not from intent but from a faulty smoke machine that behaved like a temperamental spirit. Designed to produce a consistent atmospheric haze, it instead released dense clouds at random intervals, filling rooms unpredictably and dissolving just as quickly. Lighting setups that once appeared clean transformed into swirling pockets of shadow, bending contours of faces and softening edges of furniture until scenes resembled fevered recollections rather than concrete events. Actors often lost track of spatial orientation, stepping into heavier fog banks with genuine apprehension. The cinematographer attempted to tame the machine, but each repair altered its unpredictability rather than correcting it. Eventually, the director embraced the chaos, letting the haze dictate emotional cadence. The fog would thicken during moments of doubt, thin during reveals, and drift unpredictably in transitional beats. Reviewers later praised the film's intentional surrealism, unaware the atmosphere originated from a device that never once obeyed instructions. The smoke didn't accompany the narrative, it authored its unease. Fact 6. Casting Paula E. Shepard as Alice was less a creative stroke than a desperate workaround for child labor restrictions that threatened the production schedule. Though 19 at the time, Shepard possessed a disarming blend of youthful fragility and adult emotional precision that unsettled the crew more than any scripted twist. Her performance walked an unnerving line. She looked like a child collapsing under pressure, yet her delivery carried the exhausted insight of someone decades older. Actors found it difficult to calibrate their reactions. Responding to her felt like addressing two people at once, a duality that mirrored the film's obsession with perception and misinterpretation. Shepard later admitted she never fully grasped the character's psychology, instead tapping into discomfort and instincts she could not articulate. This ambiguity seeped into every close-up, making viewers question whether Alice was victim, aggressor, or conduit for the fears of the adults around her. Shepard didn't portray childhood, she portrayed its fracture. Fact 7. The eerie soundscape that defines Alice. Sweet Alice did not come from experimental design, but from a malfunctioning recorder that warped audio whenever humidity rose inside the church. The Nagra unit stretched certain frequencies as if voices were being pulled through an unseen filter. Soft footsteps doubled themselves, creating an unnatural echo that suggested a second presence, pacing just behind the actors. Doors closing produced metallic rings with no physical justification, and breaths recorded during close-ups sometimes returned as faint moans, distorting intimacy into unease. Technicians tried recalibrating the machine, but the errors repeated with new variations each day, as though the device was developing a personality shaped by the film's tension. Instead of discarding the flawed takes, the director layered the distorted elements into key sequences, using the recorder's unpredictability to give sound and emotional texture, anxious, trembling, burdened by secrets. What critics later labeled bold psychological audio choices were in reality the mechanical tremors of a device struggling to survive the production stress. The recorder didn't fail, it listened too closely. Fact 8. The film's rain-soaked exteriors were never intended to exist. The production planned bright, dry days to counter the script's heaviness, but a series of relentless autumn storms forced the crew into a frantic improvisation. They filmed under downpours that blurred the boundaries of streets, dissolving sidewalks, windows, and faces into shifting reflections. Water streaked the lenses so persistently that entire shots resembled fractured memories rather than clear documentation. Actors shivered through scenes, their breath fogging the air, giving even mundane interactions a brittle emotional charge. The weather repeatedly drowned electrical equipment and extinguished practical lights, yet each failure created new visual layers. Puddles mirrored characters in distorted silhouettes, and wind bent umbrellas into grotesque shapes that heightened the film's unease. Instead of fighting the storm, the director allowed it to become an external expression of the story's instability. The rain didn't just create atmosphere, it exposed the fragility of every character who stepped beneath it. In the final cut, the storm felt prophetic, as if the sky had read the script first. Fact 9. The editing rhythm that defines the film's fractured psychology emerged from a catastrophe no production could plan for. Several reels vanished during transport to the post-production facility. Believing them permanently lost, the editor rebuilt whole sequences from alternate takes, incomplete trims, and scraps originally rejected for continuity errors. Emotional beats shifted in tone, characters appeared in places they had not been moments earlier, and transitions dissolved into abrupt cuts that mirrored the story's paranoia more effectively than the original structure. The editor discovered that the narrative felt more truthful when misaligned, as though the audience were being pulled through the character's anxieties rather than guided by logic. When the missing reels resurfaced weeks later, the director reviewed the footage but refused to restore it. The accidental disorientation had become essential, a visual representation of mistrust creeping into every corner of the film. What viewers interpreted as bold artistic fragmentation was, at its origin, the result of footage that briefly ceased to exist. The lost reels didn't break the movie. They clarified what it really was. Fact 10. The yellow raincoat that ultimately became the film's most recognizable visual marker started as a logistical accident rather than any planned metaphor. The wardrobe department ordered a muted, earthy coat intended to blend into the film's subdued palette, but a shipping error delivered a slick, unnervingly bright yellow garment meant for industrial work sites. Under normal circumstances, the team would have returned it, but the production was behind schedule, and the coat happened to fit perfectly. The moment it appeared on camera, everything shifted. Its glare sliced through darkness like a warning signal, reframing each scene with an electric tension. The cinematographer struggled to control exposure as the coat bounced light unpredictably, turning alleyways into luminous corridors and making the wearer appear larger, more intrusive, almost ghost-like. Extras whispered that the raincoat seemed to glow even when the set lights faded, giving the impression it carried its own inner illumination. Production notes show the director began adjusting blocking so the coat would drift through frames like a symbol of corrupted innocence. What began as a frustrating wardrobe mistake became a pulsating presence that overshadowed the film's original aesthetic. The raincoat didn't add color to the story, it rewrote its emotional grammar. Fact 11. The film's unsettling vocal distortions, often mistaken for artistic experimentation, originated in a basement space beneath the production office that seemed to warp sound in ways no one could fully explain. The sound team tested the room, hoping to use it for simple ADR sessions, but the acoustics behaved strangely. Soft murmurs echoed back, stretched and trembling, while louder exclamations sharpened into thin, almost metallic streaks of noise. Even ordinary breaths carried a strange harmonic hum, as though the air vibrated with an unseen resonance. The engineers were intrigued but uneasy, especially when microphones captured faint, high-pitched tones during moments of complete silence. Attempts to replicate the anomalies in other rooms failed. The distortions belonged uniquely to that basement. Rather than discard the recordings, the director folded them into key moments of the film, embedding the warped tones beneath panicked dialogues and transitional beats. Actors who later watched the finished sequences claimed the sounds felt like echoes of emotions their characters never expressed, emotional ghosts haunting the narrative. Audiences praised the psychological authenticity of the mix, unaware it originated from a space whose architecture seemed to shape sound according to its own inscrutable mood. The basement didn't enhance the film's fear, it whispered it. Fact 12. The resurgence of Alice. Sweet Alice owes its life not to a studio initiative, but to a single theater owner whose stubborn intuition kept the film from vanishing entirely. After the catastrophic initial release hampered by confusing posters, disorganized scheduling, and tepid critical curiosity, the movie was effectively abandoned. Prints sat idle in storage rooms, destined for obscurity. But one independent theater operator in New Jersey recognized something potent beneath the film's rough edges. He scheduled midnight showings, pairing the movie with offbeat cult titles and courting audiences who thrived on cinematic oddities. Slowly, the screenings gained momentum. Students debated the story's moral ambiguity, horror enthusiasts fixated on the mask. Others returned repeatedly, claiming they noticed details they had missed before. Word of mouth transformed a forgotten release into a local phenomenon, forcing distributors to reconsider their assumptions. When the film was finally reissued, its growing mythology eclipsed its troubled past. Ironically, its cult status did not begin with marketing genius or critical insight. It began with handmade flyers, late-night cues, and a theater owner who believed the film contained something worth saving. He didn't follow a trend, he created one. Fact 13. The film's distinctive camera movement, that subtle sway that makes every hallway feel unstable, didn't originate from a stylistic decision, but from a shoulder rig the crew couldn't afford to replace. The padding had compressed from years of use, causing the operator to constantly readjust his balance. As he compensated, the lens drifted ever so slightly, creating a breathing motion that made scenes feel observed rather than recorded. At first, the director worried the footage would look amateurish, but when reviewing early dailies, he realized the instability lent the film a strange emotional tension. Characters seemed caught inside a world that pulsed around them, as though the environment itself was uneasy with their presence. Actors later admitted they felt followed by the camera, as if it anticipated their movements instead of merely tracking them. The operator learned to synchronize the sway with dramatic beats, allowing the camera to tremble during moments of fear and settle into tense stillness during confrontations. Critics eventually celebrated the film's documentary-like immediacy. Unaware the effect resulted from worn bolts, cramped shoulders, and improvised stamina, the camera didn't just document paranoia, it physically embodied it. Fact 14. Some of the film's rawest emotional intensity emerged not from performance technique, but from fatigue that seeped into the cast after weeks of chaotic scheduling. Location conflicts repeatedly pushed filming deep into the night, forcing actors to deliver emotionally charged scenes when their nerves were frayed and their patience nearly gone. Tempers snapped unpredictably. Lines were forgotten, interrupted, or repeated with startling ferocity. Instead of smoothing these outbursts, the director recognized their authenticity and allowed them to shape the film's emotional topography. During one especially grueling shoot, an actress delivered a trembling monologue that stunned the entire crew, a speech infused with exhaustion so palpable that no one dared break the present take. Her voice cracked in unscripted places, her hands shook, and her eyes seemed hollowed by frustration. What might have been dismissed as an on-set meltdown transformed into one of the film's most unforgettable moments. In post-production, the editor built surrounding scenes around that exhaustion, letting the emotional residue bleed into the pacing. Later, audiences praised the film's unfiltered realism, unaware that its intensity was born not from design, but from a production slowly wearing its cast thin. The film didn't imitate collapse, it captured one. Fact 15. One of the film's most memorable shots, a slow, gliding movement toward a dimly lit doorway, emerged from a dolly that refused to behave. The track, warped from humidity, caused the platform to slide forward on its own once the operator released it. During a rehearsal, the dolly drifted into motion with uncanny smoothness, carrying the camera toward the doorway, as if drawn by an invisible current. Instead of stopping the take, the director urged the operator to let it continue. The resulting footage possessed an unnerving intelligence. The camera advanced with a predator's patience, its trajectory too calm to feel accidental. Attempts to recreate the movement after repairing the dolly fell flat. The motion lost its spectral quality when controlled intentionally. The director ultimately used the accidental take, restructuring the entire sequence around its eerie momentum. Cast members later joked that the equipment wanted to tell the story more than they did. In the final film, the dolly shot feels like an unseen force drifting toward revelation, a perspective that belongs neither to character nor camera. The machinery didn't malfunction, it made a choice. Fact 16. Many of the film's most intimate close-ups owe their haunting quality to a lens the crew initially believed was compromised by age. Under certain lighting angles, a faint corona appeared around the actors' faces, blurring edges and isolating expressions as though emotions were radiating outward. The cinematographer planned to retire the lens, but tight scheduling forced him to keep it in rotation. When reviewing the footage, the director was shocked by how the distortion amplified the story's themes. Characters seemed trapped within invisible emotional atmospheres, their vulnerability sharpened rather than softened. Actors were equally startled. ordinary expressions recorded with unexpected intensity, while moments of hesitation appeared magnified, almost painful to watch. The lens became a quiet collaborator, shaping performances and visual tone without revealing its mechanics. Even attempts to clean or adjust the glass changed the distortion unpredictably, as if the lens determined when to reveal or withdraw its peculiar glow. Critics later described the film's emotional isolation as deliberate technique. They never learned the truth. The lens didn't interpret the characters' fractures, it exposed them. Fact 17. The eerie musical fragments that haunt the film originated not from freshly composed material, but from a cache of abandoned recordings the composer had long dismissed as failures. Short on time and resources, he revisited the forgotten reels, warped scales, experimental organ lines, and trembling motifs that once seemed directionless. Age had altered the tapes, stretching notes into unstable shapes and creating tremors where silence once lived. As he listened, he realized these imperfections echoed the film's spiritual confusion more accurately than any polished score could. He layered these fragments with new organ tones recorded in a cold basement stairwell, capturing a resonance that felt both sacred and corrupted. The resulting soundtrack hovered between prayer and warning, threading unease through scenes that otherwise relied on visual tension alone. Viewers later praised the haunting intentionality of the music. Unaware its power emerged from discarded scraps revived by necessity, the score didn't accompany the film's moral decay. It remembered it before the film even existed. Fact 18. One of the film's most chaotic altercations took shape not through rehearsal or choreography, but through a misunderstanding that spiraled into genuine danger. During a heated kitchen scene, two actors misread their blocking cues and collided violently, sending utensils skittering across the floor and shattering decorative glass. The fear captured on their faces was not performed. It was the instinctive shock of losing control in a confined space. Instead of cutting, the director signaled them to continue, allowing adrenaline to drive the scene's unpredictable momentum. Crew members watched in alarm as the actors navigated spilled debris, their movements jagged, panicked, and riddled with authentic hesitation. When reviewing the footage, the director recognized that the accident had unlocked an emotional truth. The scripted version lacked a visceral portrait of volatility that could not be replicated safely. Though insurance reps later cited the moment as evidence of procedural negligence, the scene remained untouched in the final cut. Its rawness wasn't crafted, it erupted. Fact 19. One of the film's most peculiar supporting performances came from an actor who deliberately avoided reading the script beyond his own scenes, insisting he wanted to inhabit the story with the same confusion his character felt. At first, the director dismissed this as eccentricity, but it quickly became clear that the actor's lack of context produced a disorienting authenticity. He often questioned motivations the crew assumed were obvious, asking whether characters had hidden alliances or unseen histories. His reactions on set, the hesitant glances, the misplaced suspicion, the pauses that hung too long came from genuine uncertainty rather than crafted technique. These spontaneous moments disrupted the rhythm of several scenes, forcing other actors to adapt in real time, adding layers of volatility the director hadn't planned. In one instance, he delivered a line with such unexpected dread that the director rewrote an entire sequence to preserve the emotional ripple it created. Critics later praised his performance as enigmatic, attributing his unease to psychological depth, but those on set knew the truth. He wasn't interpreting the film's paranoia, he was living inside it. Fact 20. The climactic church sequence owes its oppressive stillness to a real grief that seeped into the production hours before cameras rolled. The crew arrived to find that the church had mistakenly scheduled a funeral service that overlapped with their reservation. Unable to work, they waited outside as mourners passed, listening to muffled hymns that drifted through the stone walls like a lament. By the time they entered, the sanctuary still held a palpable heaviness, incense lingering in the air, pews faintly warm from bodies, and a quiet tremor of sorrow that refused to dissipate. Actors described feeling burdened, as though the space demanded restraint. Movements slowed. Gestures carried unexpected reverence. A lighting rig began to flicker due to the cold, forcing the cinematographer to rely on a dimmer, more fragile illumination that heightened the sense of spiritual fragility. The footage captured that weighted atmosphere with unsettling clarity. giving the climax a haunted resonance no one had anticipated. Reviewers later argued the sequence seemed inhabited by something beyond the narrative. They weren't wrong. The scene didn't invent solemnity, it inherited it. Bonus fact: long after the film's release, whispers circulated about an unlabeled reel discovered during the chaotic transition between editing facilities. A reel containing images no one remembered shooting. When the editor examined it, he found disjointed fragments that hovered uneasily between narrative and nightmare. Empty corridors glimmered with shifting shadows that didn't match the lighting in any known setup. A childlike silhouette lingered near a stairwell, vanishing the instant the camera drifted closer. Reflections appeared in door panels and windows where no actors had been positioned, as if the camera had captured echoes rather than bodies. One segment showed the yellow raincoat swaying gently in a room with no visible wearer, the fabric stirring as though caught in a draft that didn't exist. The footage carried no audio, only the faint mechanical tremor of the projector, which made each silent image feel like a withheld confession. Crew members denied filming any of it, and the cinematographer insisted the angles weren't his. Some speculated the reel was a patchwork of accidental exposures. Others believed a second unit, one never formally assigned, had wandered the set, capturing moments between takes. The director, both fascinated and unsettled, watched the reel repeatedly before choosing to lock it away. At some point during distribution, the footage vanished entirely, leaving behind only memories among those who had glimpsed its unnerving contents. Scholars debate whether the reel truly existed or whether exhaustion distorted recollection, but those who swear they saw it agree on one thing: the unseen footage didn't expand the story, it deepened the darkness around it. Alice. Sweet Alice lingers because it refuses to offer clean answers. Its accidents, distortions, and unresolved echoes invite the viewer to question what was crafted and what simply emerged from the production's instability. Every frame feels like a negotiation between intention and coincidence, leaving space for interpretation long after the credits fade. So now the question turns to you. Which detail felt purposeful and which seemed like a trick of fate reshaping the film from the shadows? Share the moment that changed the way you saw the story and tell us which forgotten film you want us to descend into next.